Rear main seal. This is a one-piece rear main seal on these GMT 400 trucks. This is the 5.7 engine, and the first thing you have to do, which we've already done, is remove the transmission. It took us about probably 7 or 8 hours to get that done on this four-wheel drive setup. If you scoot your eyes in here, zip these flex plate bolts out there, a 14 millimeter. Got the bolts out, and this should slide off. Here's your rear main. We also got an oil pan gasket that we're going to replace. Let's get this seal out. Get your screwdriver, pound it in, start working that seal. And just like that, rear main is out. If you can get your eyeballs in there, there's a bunch of gunk that's going to be around this sealing surface that we're going to have to clean. But before we do that, we're going to take those 4 bolts out to do that retainer gasket on the rear of the crank. Just want to make sure we're on the same page. This was kind of interesting. This is the driver's side. It goes on a stud. The 2 medium length ones are middle, and the long one is the passenger side. So make sure you keep track of those and don't try to cram a long bolt into a small bolt hole. We're going to take the oil pan off now. So we're going to get all these bolts out of the way. We're going to get these 2 supports out of the way, and then we'll show you how this project continues. You don't have to do this for the rear main, but again, you're already here, you might as well, because you have to take that out to get to the rear crank seal.
Jump into a voiceover here, had some technical difficulties. That shouldn't really surprise anybody who watches our channel. Now, I'm moving into the oil filter housing, and they've got these little clips. You got to slide the black cover off of the end of the line, and then you'll see a little metal C-clamp type of clip that sits up there where that housing has the line fitting in it. And you need to push one end up like this, use your other finger to make sure it doesn't fly out, and then pull it out. That's what they look like, and if you're not careful, they'll go flying. But once those are out, you can pull these lines off. Make sure you have something under there to catch all the oil that's going to come out of there. But you pull that back, some oil is going to drain out, and you just do the same thing on both the top and the bottom here. And then once those lines are out of the way, you can take these bolts out, tap it out with the hammer. Sometimes they get kind of stuck. Again, you're going to want to empty that out. And that lets you jump into taking the oil pan off. And once you get the oil pan off, we ran into a problem. It wouldn't come over that front axle. Now, the right way to do this is going to be to just drop that front axle out of the way. But of course, we're far too lazy to do that. So instead, what we decided to do is hang it down here and just take the pickup tube off the oil. So I squeezed in there with a little 1/4-inch ratchet. Gave me just enough space to get that off and then pull the pan out. These are the gears that sit inside that pickup tube. You want to make sure you inspect those if you're going to reuse it. We ended up deciding to just use get a new oil pump, but we were going to reuse this pickup tube. They are easy enough to just clean up and reuse, and then you don't have to fight with getting that tube into that housing. So back up here, pull this rear crank seal out. And as you can tell, this gasket up here is just completely trashed. It is very brittle, and that was clearly part of where our leak was coming from in this engine.
Took the old oil pan out to the car wash and got her cleaned up pretty good. This is what you're going to want to do is get your wire wheel all the way around the sides there, so that's good and smooth. Kind of sort of do the same thing onto the block here at the pan rail. We could do a little better job than that, but it's an old truck and we're going to have to pull this motor soon anyway, so that's going to be good enough for what we're doing. When you go to install this rear crank seal back onto the engine block and you get your paper gasket, make sure you have the big hole aligned with the big hole. If you install it backwards, so you're going to have a problem. A little bit of engine assembly lube. Just going to go around the back of the crank here so it's not completely dry. Rear main, that side goes toward the engine, and there's this little flexible seal you're going to want to kind of press out so it bevels the correct way to go over the back of the crankshaft. something like that. Small block of wood to help you pound it in. They make a special tool for this, but of course we're too cheap to buy it.
That's pretty close. You're almost there.
I am almost there. What do you think?
Looks good to me.
We got ourselves the new oil pump. We had to take it apart, see, because we're going to reuse our old pickup tube. We're going to keep the new gears. This is what drives the oil through the engine. This piece here connects to the distributor through an intermediate shaft. But you need a little sleeve, ours disintegrated on the removal, to go onto the intermediate shaft to the oil pump shaft. And to do this effectively, we're going to remove the loose gear with no shaft, set it aside somewhere safe. We already did a little bit of lubricante on the inner side of this bearing. And then connect these two pieces together. And to make sure they get a good seat, give her a few taps. We're going to hold the back end of this guy together, just like so. And now, bearing is seated. Should be good to go. We're going to remove these studs here because we want to screw these little Velcro gasket and pan holders on. Those make life way easier. So here's those tabs. They hold the gasket in place, but they also will hold the pan in place. Now, it was a three-handed job to get this oil pump in. So we did that off camera, but ultimately you got to get this plate in. There's 3 nuts, bigger bolt over here. The bolt actually holds the oil pan or the oil pump. And then there's our little sleeve that we put on earlier up there. You got to make sure that aligns correctly. You'll know you're aligned with the distributor when the oil pump sits flush right up there. At this point, we did inspect our cylinders while we were under here, again off camera, but look up in your cylinder walls and see if you have any scoring. But we are ready to install the oil pan. And I'll reiterate, the correct way to do this, drop that front axle, which we didn't do. So when we get this all put back together, we're going to have to take this plate off and put our pickup tube back on while holding the pan. It's going to be a lot of fun. Had to do some off-camera work again, just don't have enough hands for this, but these guys, see, they hold the pan up there. The reason we had to go off camera, not enough clearance. So we had to jack the engine up. We used the corner of the block right there to get this pan to slide over. And now we had to take these out, drop the pan down to get the pickup tube squared away. And there we go. We got the old pickup tube attached here. That second gear's up there in that oil pump. And so we should be good to just put this all back together. Gasket's in place, rear main is in place. And with these high quality Velcro gaskets, you don't need any RTV or other crap that you shouldn't be using. And torque to spec. This job is done. Rear main's done. The rear crank seal's done. This oil pan gasket is done. Hopefully this thing doesn't leak. We'll talk about how we tighten these bolts up. See, we come to the middle, go middle, driver side, middle, other side, middle, driver side, middle, other side, all the way until you get to the ends and tighten in a star pattern like that, and you should be fine. Next thing we got to do is put the flex plate back on. Oil filter housing. We ended up doing some work on that. Cleaned it off, did a new gasket. This gasket's the one that goes between the housing and the block. And then we were going to do these, but we decided against it. We did take those out and clean them out and redope them. So hopefully it doesn't leak anymore. Remember how I said I was done? Wasn't done. Now that the oil filter housing's up in there, and we even torqued all of our flex plate bolts down to 65 foot-pounds like the manual said, or at least the internet said. We're finally done with the oil pan job and the rear main seal job. So the only thing we have left to do on this rear main job is the transmission. That's a different video, should come up here towards the end of this video. You might want to click on it. And after that trans is back in, hopefully no leaks. Thanks for watching.